Representative Shirts, how are you?
Good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you for coming. I had a baller lunch today. I am feeling so good.
Where did you go?
Dude, I went to Fun Nueva, right on the corner of 8th and whatever, and then I went to Stella's. I was with the wife. We did a lunch date, and we hit. I got mint chocolate chip. They have a gluten-free cake cone. Like, oh, I have never been happier, man.
Man, I love it. I love it.
Good time.
I love it.
Listen, you have been a federal prosecutor.
Yep.
You were JAG in the Air Force. Navy?
Air Force. Air Force Jag.
Yeah. Air Force Jag. You were federal prosecutor in the Trump administration.
Yep.
Now you have stopped that. You are now working as a legislator, and you're a state prosecutor as well.
I'm still in the Air Force. Still in the Air Force Reserves and prosecuting cases for them when we're not in session. So
that's a lot, my guy.
Yeah, that's good. It's good. We live on that. You live on the family ranch up in Weezer, where we grew up, and it's beautiful part of our state.
How big is your ranch?
Gosh, we farm probably about 1,000 acres, but I'm part of my dad's one of 10, and so we have a lot of my family's in it too. We have a lot of sheep, and so that kind of bleeds down to Wilder, and we take them all around the state, all the way up to New Meadows, McCall in the summer. So if you see sheep trailing around, they're usually ours. So we're getting around the state. Now it's great.
I've had Brett Wilder on several times.
Yeah, Wilders are great.
Yeah, he's great. And his wife is the vice president of the Wool Growers Association, right? Yeah. I had him on. He actually brought in a leg of lamb. We did a lamb.
I didn't know I should have brought something. I didn't know.
Next time.
I'm learning.
Next time. But he gave this incredible rundown. It's like, why has lamb fallen from grace in the United States? And he gave this huge rundown. And he was like, well, listen,
so good.
It goes back to like the World Wars, right? Where you had 50-gallon drums of mutton getting sent over to the troops. And then that generation of vets came home and like, under no circumstance will I ever eat lamb again.
It got back into the culture.
Yeah, right. Because I grew up eating, I remember we always had a little jar of mint jelly in the fridge. And it was like, all crystallized and nasty. But then we'd have lamb and just slop it on. It was great. But he brought in this incredible savory leg of lamb, and we ate it, and he was like, love the recipe. Yeah.
We have the best lamb in the country. And you go here in Idaho, and it's amazing. It's sad. You go in these grocery stores and you see New Zealand lamb for sale when we're growing it here right in the foothills. Right.
The other thing he brought up, he's like, listen, no matter what, you get Australian or New Zealand land, I guarantee it's at least 3 to 4 weeks since that bad boy was harvested.
100%.
Because they got to get it here, and it takes a lot of time. So even though it's been vacuum sealed in there, or partially frozen, mostly frozen, completely frozen, like that thing is not fresh.
Yeah.
When I get something from Brett, it's like, this was buying yesterday.
Oh, they're great. They're fantastic. They do a good job.
They really. You know what I want? I want some sheepskin attire. I want a sheepskin jacket, like a bomber jacket.
Yeah, man, that's easy. We'll make it happen. Yeah.
Dude, let me know when and how, because he sent me a link to it. He was like, well, this is the only person I know doing it. It was like $1,000. I was like, $1,000. Okay, if you're saying it's $1,000, fine. Maybe it's your outfit. You're like, yeah, we got
this is a promo for my sheep bomber jacket. That's why I'm here.
Could you imagine if I'm on screen with some giant jacket?
I'd love it.
I'm not hard enough to do that. I can barely manage a hoodie.
We have a lot of sheepskin rugs at home. I mean, you can wear it around your neck if you really want to.
You know what I want to do? I want to get a couple sheepskin rugs, and I want to do, what was that group in Game of Thrones, the Night Watch? The Men of the Watch, right? Yeah, they were like all in black. And I want to spray paint sheepskin and then just wander around my neighborhood. I am the sword in the darkness.
Oh, I love it.
Did you ever watch those series?
Not a little bit, just a couple episodes, not a ton.
The problem is the first season, you're like, I don't care. What's going on? Once you get past the first season, you're fine. Yeah. Anyway, listen, we're far afoot.
Yeah, sorry, we were.
No, you're good. Listen, you've done a lot of federal prosecution.
Yeah.
One big thing that people are very thankful that this administration is focusing on, at least very, very loudly, is human trafficking. I've talked to a lot of people about this, and most recently, I had Chief Ruby from Eagle Police Department on, because they had done a bust. I believe it was Detective Ryan Pacheco had done a bust on a massage parlor who was engaged in illicit activity.
That's fantastic.
And on top of that, they're like, listen, a lot of times these kinds of things, you have people that are being human trafficked and forced into this kind of labor. You also see that in the agricultural sector, where people, obviously are perhaps maybe coming over illegal, and then they get swooped up and essentially human trafficked for labor or indentured servitude. The Trump administration was really hard on this when they came in, That in the original term, I remember seeing reports of like, oh, he just, arrested 106 whatever traffickers. We also have the hanging, elephant in the room, which is like the Epstein Island question
Yeah.
that no one has been charged with.
It's crazy.
Can you comment on any of this?
From my perspective, as someone who was boots on the ground during the first Trump administration, on the human trafficking piece here in our state in Idaho, I mean, we have it, and that's the sad part about it. But we were really serious about getting rid of it, right? And so when it comes, I think that's why people love our state, right? And why so many people are moving in here, because they know it's safe. They know that people in those positions are going to handle these problems seriously, and we did. And you know, thankfully, it's a lot of my colleagues that are still at the U.S. Attorney's Office and now back under the Trump administration, are still handling those problems. And so you have a lot, like you mentioned, in the massage parlors, things where people are trafficked in those situations. But that human trafficking definition is broad, right? And so I did a lot of cases where you had underage girls being solicited for a wide variety of things, right? And so you'd have males, and it wasn't even cash, you know, even things like as simple as like nicotine or vapes or things like that, where they're solicited on Snapchat and then for sexual acts. And it's awful. You hate to think that it's here in the state, but we are handling it seriously. And honestly, our judges handle it seriously. We pick you up on one of those things. You're going away, and largely for the rest of your life, or nearly for the rest of your life, as you should. I think that's something that we as Idahoans can really get around.
Oh, I don't think there's anybody not supporting that.
You hope not. And if they're not there, I don't know what to tell them.
Yeah, that's not a conversation I can entertain for very long.
Yeah.
When you talk about, you just brought up Snapchat. This is one thing that I think Idaho and the nation, the world really is coming to terms with, which is like, okay, we got this tech, right? We got tech, and then with the tech came applications. You know, opening the App Store for the Apple App Store was like, wow, like it was essentially the Wild West. There was no regulation on what the apps could do. There was no regulation on you know, who's making them, who's getting them.
Yeah.
Then, you know, you have the market strategy of the free application was in-app purchases, which kind of like took everything by storm, which is pretty wild. But we have created with the invention of social media, we've created new areas of predation.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
So I educate, I do presentations from time to time and on tech education with different groups. And one of the things I always explain is like, look, 20 years ago, we had one type of predator, right? In general. And that was somebody who could overcome the geographic and temporal proximity with kids. You had to be close to a kid at the same time the kid was there.
Right.
Like these were largely sports coaches or religious leaders.
Family members.
Yes. Things of that nature. And they were also willing to take the risk to like engage with young people. And it was a risky endeavor because you had to be there when the kid was there. And if the kid was there, a parent was probably there. Right. And like, this is a difficult thing. Okay. Yeah. Now we have 4 different types, right? And that's because of social media. We have the original predators, which are crazy and horrific.
Right.
They've now been turbocharged. So if you're a predator in like a sports camp, you probably use social media to get more people to your camp, more things. You have more credibility in the community outwardly, and then you can have more people to prey upon.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But after that, we actually invented a new type of predator that's like I call these the bench warmers. So people that were incapable of overcoming geographic or temporal proximity. Like if you live under a bridge, you're some homeless guy, you're not going into like a sports camp and buddying up next to a kid because people could see you and be like, wait, what's this person doing? And you had to be there at the same time. Now these people can just go to like the free computer banks at the Meridian Library and get on with social media and get on and start talking to young people and entice them out. So like, we kind of, that didn't exist before because there was no way for them to reach young people. Then you have international crime syndicates where you have large banks of people in like warehouses and the Ivory Coast or Russia or wherever that are just, enticing our kids into sending inappropriate media and then extorting them. Right. And then you finally have young people preying on young people. Right. Which is just horrific. You have 16-year-olds engaging in scams against other 16-year-olds that would have been impossible before. That's a huge thing. So when you're talking about being a prosecutor against this, was there recognition in the prosecutor circles about like, okay, the crimes and the nature of crimes and the world we're fighting against is changing. Like if you were trying to prosecute predators 15 years ago, you really only had or 20 years ago, you really only had a small area. Like you didn't have to worry about, necessarily tech stuff. Like, child porn, you always had to worry about, but even that was much more limited 20 years ago. Like how has it changed since you've been around?
I mean, it's so broad now. Right. And that's what I tell people when you give them a phone, when you give an Idaho kid a phone, you take the good with the bad, right? And you can unfortunately allow them to be preyed upon by people around the world, right? And so I had this case out of Eastern Idaho, and it was, you think about Instagram, right? I think we all have Instagram. I'm sure this will probably end up being on Instagram and something, right? So you're scrolling through your Instagram feed. Obviously you like bulldogs, maybe like your algorithm sends you to bulldogs. Unfortunately, what the algorithm has shown for people who have, are pedophiles, right? That interest in children, that's where their feed kicks them to, where their algorithm kicks them to. And so what we saw, a lot of cases, had this case out of Eastern Idaho. It was a 7th grade volleyball, your very nice person, young girl, was preyed upon by a guy from Minnesota. He'd never actually set foot in our state ever before, but he was able to do terrible things to this child. And we ended up, after that had kind of happened, getting involved and arresting him and then flying him here to face charges. But it's amazing, and it's so scary that somebody can prey upon our kids, our Idaho kids, from afar without ever having to be close. And it just opens up this whole nother world, and it makes it more difficult for parents to defend against that, and makes us more difficult for law enforcement and for that eventual prosecution of tracking those people down, because they're smart, right? They usually get on, they meet somebody through Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, or something like that, and then they're moving them onto apps like Telegram and other apps like that we can't get to, that we don't have subpoena power over or search authority over. So that's how, and they're smart the way they do it, and it's terrible. It's absolutely tragic. So we have to do everything we can to get above the curve, but it's hard. It's really hard. It's a different world than it was 15, 20 years ago. And the internet's caused it, and phones with kids have really caused it, unfortunately.
Man, the migration is one thing that people just don't get. Like and this is a big problem in things like Roblox or Minecraft, where people are like, listen, yeah, my kid's around other people, but like the communication on Minecraft is so rudimentary.
Yeah.
Like you can't send media, you can't talk to people, like you can't do anything on Minecraft. Yeah, they don't need to do it on Minecraft. What they do is need to establish some kind of connection with those kids and then get them to migrate to, Snap or Instagram or something Snap or Telegram. And that's when it's like, okay, now it's game on, right? And they really just need, their cases was like 45 seconds. Like, can you get some get some kind of compromising information that they can leverage against kids? When you talk about a 7th grader who's a volleyball player, and again, I'm not asking for details. But there's a problem that parents don't understand that I worry about, which is, and again, I'd love your commentary on this, which is, look, people think if they train their kids to, if they're like, look, I got a daughter, she's not putting inappropriate stuff on there. Like I can see her feed. Right. This is just her at the volleyball tournament, right? It's no problem. But for people that are looking for 7th grade girls at the volleyball tournament, then they know that kid is a target. They're like, perfect, this is my target audience. And I know what I'm going to say. I'm going to either make up that I'm a recruiter. I'm going to make up that I'm a fellow volleyball girl. Exactly. I'm going to do anything. Just by the very presence of your child being on that social media platform makes her or him a potential target for predators. And they know exactly what to say to get kids. So a lot of times people, or at least parents that I've heard, are like, well, I make sure my kid doesn't do anything inappropriate on social media. It's like, no.
Yeah.
If your kid's on social media, they're a target. That's it.
You're providing the opportunity. Unfortunately, like that's just the sad truth of where we are in society. You provide contact with the outside world with opportunities who just don't have your child's best interest at heart, and would likely just seek for them to be harmed. And, case after case, it was heartbreaking because parents, they thought they knew, they thought they checked, and there's a lot of things they just can't do. And it's not the kid's fault, right? They're being manipulated by, like you said, either someone pretending to be somebody their age, someone pretending to be that volleyball recruiter, or somebody else, and they're using that as a mechanism. These people they're smart, and they're manipulating children who don't have that full wherewithal yet. And then they use other types of manipulation where, they're blackmailing them and things like that. And that's when they get to a situation where, the biggest thing when we would go around and talk to schools, right? It wasn't trying to shame them. Hey, if something happened, it was like, it's okay to tell somebody something does, right? We can figure it out and get you help, right? If something does happen, because you don't want to shame them into being the point where, if something bad happens, because that part, it won't ever come out. And then you have a predator out there, and then you have a kid with, that really has a hard time rectifying that.
Right.
Yeah.
Man,
it's tough.
I was in I drop off my son at middle school every morning, and I was in the car with him like 5 months ago, and we were like sitting in traffic. He's like, Dad, I got to tell you something. And I was like, oh shit.
No.
I was like, yeah, man, what's going on? He's like, hey, on my school computer. I was like, oh
no.
He's like, I've been looking at a lot of Star Wars videos. I was like, oh my God. Oh my God.
Oh, I love it.
And sure enough, I was like, okay, listen, I'm not mad at you. Thank you for telling me. And I was like, grab your school computer right now. And we were in stop and go traffic. So he like reaches in the back, grabs it, get out my phone. I just hotspot it to my phone.
Yeah.
Right. Because people are like, well, the Chromebooks don't have internet. I'm like, but the phones do.
Yeah.
So we hotspot it. And I'm like, show me how you do it. So he pulls up his school administered Chromebook and opens YouTube. And he's like, listen, he's like, this is a problem. And he like puts in like a Star Wars music video that he was watching.
Right.
He's like, see how it's blurred? And I was like, yeah, bud, it's blurred. You can't watch it. And he's like, yeah, but watch. So he copies the URL, opens PowerPoint, goes to insert URL, puts the URL into the PowerPoint and starts playing immediately. And I was like, and again, like everybody thinks their son's smart. Yeah. My son did not figure this out. Right. Like, let me be clear. I'm not saying kudos to my son. Like he's not dumb, but he was like, I was like, where did you figure this out? He said, well, like this guy at school has been showing everyone. And that's all like, there are instances in this area where I was talking to an administrator recently. It's like we had a kid, a freshman kid in high school who figured out workarounds to all of our school tech. Right. And he started a Google Classroom and invited everybody in the district and was showing everybody in the district in real time how to get around all of the blocks we had on our computers. And
that's surprising.
Yeah. And it's like, this is what you're up against when you're dealing with technology. Like there is no way currently with our current understanding of technology to make any device, either personal tech devices or school administered tech 100% safe. Yeah. Like you can't do it. There are always ways to get around things.
And the social media companies have a vested interest in getting your kids on there and keeping them on there, right? That's the sad part. It's, I mean, it's akin to tobacco, right? You hook them early and then they can, the current internet age of consent is 13 in the United States. Federal law, it hasn't been updated since like 20, 30 years ago. And so it's a bad deal. And they get them on there and they don't care. They don't care about your kids. They try to pretend like they do. Social media companies do not care about your kids.
Man, it's true.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I find really interesting? The predation and mixing of young people and old people is not an accident on social media. It's a feature of social media. And what I mean by that is they could stop it, right? But if they stopped it, it would be less interesting to the adults that want to be mixed with kids.
Yep.
And that would be bad for the social media company.
Yeah.
Like they're just interested in getting as many warm bodies on there mixing for whatever reasons as possible. Like these are the smartest people in the world. You think Elon Musk couldn't figure out like an age verification
of course they
or
could.
Like all of Facebook, like in the entirety of Facebook couldn't figure out a way to verify age and make sure pedophiles or old people do not mix. Like, and like, yeah, they could do it. They have everything. They have the world right now. They could figure it out. And you have, Senator Cook who tried to pass, some bill about tech, or not some bill, but he has a bill that he's been working on over and over to pass to protect, to say like, hey, if this personal technological device is sold in the state of Idaho and, it's sold to a minor, there's going to be this toggle switch that's flipped on that says, hey, minor controls are on. Right. Now, by the way, I know that toggle exists. I don't even know how to find it on my iPhone. And I'm not an idiot. I know it exists. Right. Like it's too complex. Like it should be the first button. It's like, is this a minor? Yes or no? And then you go from there.
Yeah.
A lot of people have talked to me, and again, you work a lot in the space of legislation around law enforcement. People have talked to me a lot about like, why can't Idaho? I think Florida had that bill recently where they're like, we're going to, make it illegal for minors under 14 or something to have social media. Is there any talk in Idaho of doing things of that nature? And what would the problems be?
I think there is talk, right? And I think it's a good idea. It's just getting everybody on the same page. And the problem, I think one of the biggest problems is once this starts coming out, once hey, we're going to propose a bill, the social media companies come out with their folks and they try to squash it. And they try to squash it from a number of reasons. Hey,
freedom of speech.
You shouldn't regulate us. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be costly. We can't do it. All these other things. But I think it takes the will of the people, right, to say, hey, this is not a good thing for our kids, right? We can collectively agree at some age, this isn't something we want to start our kids on so early. And I think we're getting there, right? And you see around the valley, you know, you've even seen some bills this session. I think you're going to see some more bills about cell phone usage in schools, which is a hot topic. And ultimately, I think there's a lot of people that are just like, hey, as a generation that grew up with a phone, and you're kind of seeing the impact it's having on kids, we want to make sure that there are some common sense things that we can take and say, hey, social media companies, you don't get carte blanche on our kids from an early age and be able to influence them throughout their whole life. It's not a good thing. So I think some common sense regulation would be a good idea, but there's a powerful force against it from big tech, from the social media companies who have a vested interest in making sure those things don't get started around the country.
When you talk about common sense legislation around social media and just law enforcement in general, there was a fentanyl bill last year that Representative Hill ran and passed.
Yeah, great bill.
That required mandatory minimums for fentanyl, like we have.
Yeah,
it's not
common.
It's not like we introduced mandatory minimums to the state of Idaho. No. Like we have mandatory minimums.
Every other drug.
Right, like heroin, meth.
Heroin, meth.
We have mandatory minimums at certain quantities. And this mandatory minimum was focused specifically on dealers. It was not focused on users.
Yeah.
All these people showed up.
It's a big difference. That's what you want to target.
Right,
You want to target the dealers. Yep.
Right. You want to stop the trafficking and distribution mechanisms. This mandatory minimum was not for somebody who got caught using fentanyl, right? Yeah. All of these things, there was an enormous pushback against that.
Yeah.
What drives a pushback against something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I prosecuted too a lot of cartel connected drug crimes at the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Idaho, and we would, you know, just seeing the routes that people were able to bring that stuff in our state was terrible. And I did, unfortunately, I had to prosecute cases where people had been dealt fentanyl and caused the death of a loved one, right? And those dealers, they don't care, right? They don't care about people's lives. It's all about making money for them. And it really shocked me. It was one of the big reasons why I wanted to run. The pushback and the difficulty of getting something like that passed that should have been, I mean, 90% of Idahoans think that's a good idea. It's good policy, right? It allows us to go after the people we want to go after, these cartel folks who are bringing fentanyl and killing people in our state. That's a good thing, and giving prosecutors the ability to effectively prosecute them. But you had a lot of pushback, right? And I think that's in some ways, you know, Idahoans, I think they're kind of scratching their head. Why would something get so much pushback from what we should be a pro law and order state? I think we are. I think we are a pro law and order state. I think that's why a lot of people are moving here. But there's a strain there, right? There's a strain there in some circles, you know, and they try. There's some arguments about, hey, well, we don't want to, you know, increase the prison population or things like that. It's like I don't think anybody wants to spend more money on prisons. But we can't have people dealing stuff that's killing people.
Yeah,
right?
like the whole I don't want to increase the prison population. It's like, okay, well, do you want to do it if we fill it with murderers?
Right.
Like, wait, okay, you don't want to do it if we catch more murderers.
Right.
Like which principle wins?
Right.
You don't like having a large prison population. You don't want murderers on the street. Okay, which one wins in this problem? If we have more murderers than our prisons can hold, then do you want to increase the prison population? It's like, I've never understood that. It's like we have crime. Yeah. We have people dealing drugs that could kill a 16-year-old. You think you're getting like an Adderall pill or ADHD medication, or you think you're just getting some innocuous amount of, you know, illegal marijuana. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, there are any kind of number of things that could lead to somebody getting fentanyl when they weren't expecting it, and not like some classic user, and they die.
Right.
Like that's it.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So my district's the Western Treasure Valley. You know, Canyon, Payette, Washington County, all the west, and we border Oregon. And you saw the turmoil, right, caused by you know, the law that essentially decriminalized all drugs. And you see it. You can cross the border into Ontario, in a place. I mean, I remember fondly. My grandma would take me school shopping in Ontario as a kid. It was a nice, beautiful, clean city. It's a different world today. It is a different world. And I knocked a lot of doors during the campaign, and you talk to people, and that's the thing. Like, we do not want to become like the place across the river, right? And a lot of that starts with that drug policy. But you have folks, unfortunately, who maybe don't fully see it there yet. Hopefully they do. Hopefully they kind of can see, they go around and say, hey, that we don't want to become like Oregon, right? We don't want to become like these states that have gotten softer on drug crime, right? That's not the place we want to be, especially when we have, I mean, think about fentanyl. You know, fentanyl the precursors come from China, through the cartels in Mexico, funneled across the border, and by the time across the border into Idaho, it's probably 2 days. right? It's quick. They move quickly across the border and they come right up. But it all goes back to China, right? There's a big part of it where China is, and the Biden administration had a really tough time trying to solve that problem. They didn't solve it. Hopefully Trump can get it solved. They want to pump precursors into Mexico because it ends up in here.
Right.
And it does. And it's kind of the sad truth of it when you follow the whole, the whole system about how fentanyl is produced, and then it's ultimately just killing Idahoans. And so there's a lot of connections there. So it was a head scratcher for me. How could people oppose us when you see the impact it's having in our communities?
Years ago, I heard the argument that if you legalize drugs, then like it was the prohibition kind of analogy, which is, look, when we entered into prohibition, that's when we created the mob, right? Because we created a demand. There was a demand for a product. We took away the supply. The demand still had to be filled. And that created the illegal alcohol system. And, the rise of Al Capone and all, the gangsters with the big slugs and, the crazy cars and everything. And the argument went, if we legalize this, we would take away all of the illegal money and all of the problems around it, because the real problem is, the drug cartels and whatnot. That has not worked in any area that they like. Can you help me understand how it's like, if there's no like bootleg market here in Idaho? Because you can go to the state-run liquor store, whatever liquor store, and you can buy whatever you want. It's like, here you go, like have some alcohol. So why didn't it work in places like Ontario, where it's like, okay, you can get whatever you want wherever you want? So like, how are they dealing with, is it that it's not necessarily that there's the illegal drug trade, but it's the crime that comes along with having a completely inebriated, intoxicated population, where it's like, yeah, look, maybe they're not getting illegal heroin.
Right.
It's totally legal, but they're still on heroin. Or like, maybe they're not getting illegal meth. It's legal meth. It's legal PCP.
Right.
They bought it legally. There's no illegal black market for PCP. You still got people on PCP.
Oh, exactly, 100%. And I mean, that's the thing. Those drugs are so harmful, right? People try to equate alcohol to, fentanyl or PCP. Good luck, right?
Right.
It's apples and oranges. But two, even in Oregon, you decriminalize it. I mean, all that does is enable the cartel to continue to pump and fill that void, right? They are the producers, and they have it. I think at some point, maybe meth in our state 20 years ago was $4,000, right? And a lot of that was maybe 50% pure meth, and a lot of it was cooked here in the state or maybe trafficked up. Now everything comes from the border, right? Across the border, and hopefully we're hoping Trump, I know he's going to figure it out. It sounds like it. Sounds like they're putting the right things in place to stop that flow of drugs. But the way it had gotten, the price had gone down to like $2,000 a pound for meth, and the purity level had gone up to about 95%. And so unfortunately, that all we see is that, the cartels are so sophisticated now. So sophisticated in how they run their product. And so if we totally give up and say, okay, well, you got us, you can have it, and we'll try to control it, they'll just continue to pump it in and continue to ruin people's lives, right? You have to have some mechanism for people, some reform mechanism to try to get them back on the right track. And I've seen this a lot with people. You prosecute a dealer or something, and they come back and they end up getting out, and they come and talk to you. I have a lot of people come and talk to me, and it's like, you changed my life, right? You allowed me to get clean. You allowed me to stop doing what I was doing, and you need that hard break, right? Just saying, hey, we're going to send somebody who's doing criminal activity to therapy or rehabilitation, that doesn't work. You need a good, clean break from those terrible things in society that are implicated in our society, and allowing them to break free of it. And it does. It's a great thing. None of us prosecutors want to stick people in prison, right? But we have to protect society. We have to think about it clear-headed.
That's a lot.
Yeah, man. There you go.
That's a lot. God bless it. Listen to me. I really appreciate you coming.
Yeah.
Are there any
Thanks,
bills?
Matt.
Are there any bills or things that we should look for that are coming up that are being worked on right now?
There's a lot of things, and honestly, I have an ag bill, right? It's an ag exemption bill. It's not anything else we were talking about, but it's something that's near and dear to our heart, making sure our ag producers are able to construct their ag buildings. There's been a lot of issues going on with the state. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right, in our state. So we were talking about that this morning. I got it through committee today, so that's going to come. So
what are you like supporting, like straw bale buildings? Like what are you talking about?
No, it's just ag buildings. Ag buildings in general. It's interesting around the state. In our state, if you have production agriculture, you can build barns or shops or things like that. And great. And it's, you don't need to go through an extensive permitting process to do that. Unfortunately, there's been some areas of our state have tried to redefine what an ag building is, right? And so that has caused our farmers and ranchers a lot of turmoil.
Can we get a carve out for barn dominiums?
Yeah.
I want a barn dominium so bad. Like, give me a 4,000 square foot barn with a loft and let me just build a dumb little house in it.
This doesn't go that far, just for production ag, but it helps our folks. I think that's why Idaho is such a great ag state, and it's near and dear to my heart. And I think little things like that is something that's just on my mind because that's where I came. But you're going to see big tax cuts this session, which is a great thing for our state. And we'll continue to churn along on those and do the good work. We're hoping to introduce some more pro law enforcement stuff here soon. So I think there's more to come on that piece.
Okay, well, when the pro law enforcement stuff comes out, come back in.
Yeah, I will.
I've been talking about a lot of people. I had Mike Morali on, and Chief Ingram on, and also Bob Gillis on, a lot of different people that are talking law enforcement. And again, it's frustrating that you have a bill like school choice has really sucked the oxygen out of the room for a lot of things. And there's so many other awesome bills coming through and people really trying to improve and refine Idaho for the betterment of the Idaho people. So I want to hear about those other bills. So thank you for coming in, sir. I appreciate you. Let's do it again.
Appreciate it. Take care.